Hello and welcome to Mental Health Matters with me, Dr. Audrey Tang. Today's show is all about sexual well-being because we like to take a deep dive into topics that we don't always talk about. My co-host is Judith Crosier, and so let's start the discussion. Good morning, Jude. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Is it too early to start talking about sex?
Probably, but that's fine.
We'll do it anyway.
Yeah.
Now, I know when I was younger, I used to talk about sex a lot, probably because I either wasn't having it or wanted to boast I was having it, because at that age, that's the thing. Now, I don't talk about it at all. Not even with my partner, not even with my husband. So, what about yourself?
I think it's probably a very similar thing. I think when it's maybe new and exciting, maybe you talk about it then. I don't know. I don't remember talking about it very much with my friends, for example. With a partner, it's different.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, not really at all.
We'd love to hear in the comments if you have any thoughts on this. Do you talk about sex and who do you talk about it with? Now, the thing is, with talking about sex, a friend of mine, she's just gone through the menopause, and she was saying that, again, her sex life had changed, and finally, she plucked up the courage to speak to her friends about it, her girlfriends. And then they said, actually, I'm feeling the same thing. And suddenly, she felt such a relief that she could talk about it. It wasn't weird. You weren't the only ones.
So she needed that. She needed to open up the discussion because otherwise everybody wouldn't be talking about it, I guess.
And you assume, don't you?
Yeah.
You just sit there and you just assume everyone's having this wonderful sex life, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird thing.
It's a weird thing because it is quite taboo. And then if you go somewhere like Sweden or Scandinavia, I know that's a bit of a stereotype, but it's true that some countries or some cultures are very much more open about it. But I think that maybe we're still learning to get there, maybe?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. What was interesting, I was in Malaysia over Christmas, and they opened their first sex shop in Penang, which it has, again, started conversations going. And it's something to me, I think good sexual health is about conversation to start with before it gets to anything else. That's my thought.
I think so. I think that's a way of bringing the subject up. And then if your friends are talking about something, you think, maybe I should do that, maybe I shouldn't do that, or maybe that's something that I need to investigate. Then conversation starts maybe with your friends.
Yeah.
But can I just go back to Penang?
Yeah.
Is that somewhere where a sex shop would be very unusual?
Extremely taboo.
Okay.
Extremely taboo. And it's run by, I believe, she comes from one of the medical industries.
Right.
And so what she's actually able to do when people come in, because you end up coming into this sex shop out of curiosity, but end up having conversations, almost needing a therapist. So she was saying that she actually has to have some sexual health conversations as much as anything else, and I mean physical sexual health conversations. So I think it's a good thing to actually start the talk. Going to taboos, why do you think it's so taboo? I mean, and is it something that becomes taboo as we get older?
I think maybe it's got something to do with the way you're brought up. If you're brought up in a family where it's, the television goes off the minute a suggestion comes on, then it's not going to be something that you necessarily find easy to talk about with your friends even. So maybe it starts there. I don't really know. I just think it's also intimacy. People can't always talk about intimacy.
Yeah, that's true. And I think whilst you were talking, it was just sort of things were clicking into place. There is that element of you're brought up thinking it's something to be embarrassed of. You're brought up thinking it's something to not talk about. It's not nice girls don't talk about it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then when I was saying earlier, I talked about it with my friends, but that was more sensationalist. It's almost the other extreme of, oh, what are you doing? And then you learn all the acronyms and those sorts of things. No one actually ever talks about it properly. I was speaking to a woman about the menopause. I was interviewing a doctor about it. And she said, we need to actually start calling private parts by their actual names. So start saying vagina, start saying penis, don't make up words for it. And things like periods, call them periods, not on the blob and other kind of euphemisms. Do you think that's going to make a difference?
I think it probably will because it normalises it.
Yes.
And that probably comes from school as well. I mean, sex ed now is very different to how I and you probably had it.
Yes.
But teachers are generally quite embarrassed as well to talk about it, and so children are going to automatically pick up, oh, this is an embarrassing thing to talk about, so therefore I won't talk about it ever.
Well, that's why we're so thrilled to have today's guest on. We have Madina Demirbas, and she is a sex therapist. She supports, in particular, couples in relationships who are also undergoing sex problems, but she is able to talk very broadly on this subject. But before we meet our first guest, I'm going to hand over to resident expert on men's health, Tim Dwelly, and he is going to talk about why men struggle to communicate.
What a question. There's so many possibilities, because everyone's different. And they'll have their own reasons, right? But does any of the following sound familiar? In the playground, the weak don't survive. At work, we have to be leaders, make tough decisions. Pressure, it's all part of the job. We just got to handle it and crack on. And then we come home to a family relying on us for support. We don't have time for any of that fluffy stuff. There's too many problems to fix. Real men would not dream of crying. We're not wimps. Besides, our mates down the pub would never let us live it down. I rarely go to the doctors for any real health problems, let alone because I feel a bit sad. I witnessed a great example of this the other day. I was with some friends, a couple. Let's call them Ginger and Fred. They were watching an article on the news that was discussing an increase in mental health issues. And Ginger asked Fred for his thoughts on the subject. And Fred replied flippantly that it was just an attempt to get out of work. He followed it up with a hearty laugh. He meant no harm by it. It was just an off-the-cuff remark. I know him pretty well, and I can confidently say that he didn't mean it. He knows mental health is important. It was just a comment designed to raise a laugh. I don't agree with any of these outdated views and stereotypes, but they are prevalent through society. They can vary in their influence depending on your culture, but they're pushed down through generations, passed on from father to son. They're reinforced and perpetuated through the media, through society. They're ingrained in us, and they are utter tosh. But still, we don't want to be weak. It's weak to admit you have a problem. You're weak if you cry. Showing others you're upset by something is a weakness. Who wants to be a weakling? Just utter rubbish. Speaking out about your own mental health is anything but a weakness. It's a strength, perhaps even a superpower. To be able to raise your hand and talk to someone or show that you're not coping actually takes a great deal of strength. You manage to do that in spite of all your own and society's misconceptions, then you are brave. You have far more courage than you think. You're setting aside all those misconceptions and you're taking action. And yet therein lies the irony. You see, at times when we struggle, times of weakness, when life or other disasters are affecting our mental health, we feel at our weakest, just when we need some strength. So it becomes all too common to take the easier route. Just stay quiet, suffer in silence, and carry on. But it's those times when we need to gather our strength and speak out. So for this episode, I'm not going to give a great big long list of advice. I'm going to talk about multiple steps to addressing mental health. No loads of bullet points. I just want to hammer home one simple message. Suffering from mental health is not, I repeat, not a weakness. The best display of strength and courage you can show is to speak out and do something about it.
Welcome to Mental Health Matters, Madina. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you. It's a big pleasure and honour to be here as well with you.
Now, I've watched your TED Talk and it is fabulous. You give brilliant metaphors, but we'll get to that shortly. Let's ask you first, you focus in particular on the sexual health of couples in relationships. Are there any common issues that present that you've seen in your practice?
Yes, I can't speak for the whole population, but usually probably it's the ads or something that works, but usually the issues that I hear over and over is the diminished sexual desire within the couples over in the long-term relationships, or lack of desire to start with. So it's either loss of libido or diminished libido. We also are talking sometimes overcoming adultery and topics like that. And I haven't worked, it's really fascinating to work around the menopause issue and the sexual health. I haven't had this inquiries yet, but I'm really looking forward.
It is such a big area, the menopause, because you get other physical problems with that as well, don't you? Everything goes dry, so that's it. Everything's not comfortable, and then it becomes embarrassing to talk to your partner about it, I think.
Absolutely. Even if there is a good connection, I suppose, it's still something where women are vulnerable, extremely vulnerable, because there's so little support offered in that regard. It's just something that you are expected to deal on your own, because that's what women do, you know.
What are the common causes of... I mean, this is a big question.
It really depends on the couple, of course. What I observe and what I read is sort of first of all, I always look at the broader context of a culture that we live in and the context that we live in. And for example, the COVID has really hit many couples. Interestingly, the study shows that people became more like closer friends to each other, but their sex life has diminished.
How interesting.
And that's how it usually works, because intimacy would prevent the sexual desire, because you would need space and you would need distance to want somebody. And when we were in COVID, we were always together and we had to sort of merge and be efficient and be friends to overcome. So we did become better friends, but as lovers it was a bit shaky, especially for long-term couples.
Do you know, that's blown my mind.
Yeah, I would never have thought that. I would have thought that either people would have come much closer intimacy-wise, or the opposite, but not have that kind of in between.
Yeah, it was one of the biggest probably discoveries when I studied the sex therapy, that obviously you do need intimacy, certain amount of intimacy to have a better sexual life, but then after a while it gets to the point when it hinders it. It hinders your assertiveness, your aggression that is needed for the sexual desire. You're starting to care too much about the feelings and how your partner is and so on. So you turn into roommates, or some couples would describe it as turning into flatmates, and it's all they would describe their experience more of a loss. So there was something there, like a desire, and then it gradually turned into brotherhood, sisterhood.
That's so interesting, because like you, Jude, I was thinking intimacy is so important in that sexual relationship, and I love the way you've described it as becoming too close, too much intimacy, too much caring, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the thing is though, why do we then ignore the sexual needs? So we've become great friends. We're now besties. We're now living together and we are sleeping in the same bed and it's all snuggly and lovely, but no sex. So why are we going, but that's okay, I'm coping with that?
Because we were, you were talking earlier about the sex ad, and we barely know how the sexual desire is working, what feeds it and what doesn't. Because sexual desire and sex are not the same thing. What feeds your sexual interest in somebody to start with is very different to what would feed it later on in your long-term relationship, if that's your plan. And that's what I'm specializing in. Because we don't have a problem of, really, really general perspective, we wouldn't have problem wanting somebody that we don't know, who's mysterious and charming, and with whom we don't share the household responsibilities, you know.
It's
But
so
then,
true.
as we get closer, as we share certain experiences, it shifts, and what feeds it, and then we have to sort of create artificial space between us. But that has to be, you know, this space has to come from the space of still like wanting to reconnect, rather than, you know, oh, I'm creating this space because I have resentment, and that happens a lot.
That's so interesting. Sorry to interrupt. It was just on the space point there. There is that thing about where if your partner, your lover is working late all the time and then they're tired, that space is not helpful space.
No, not that type of space. You know, rather a conscious space. But I think the reason why, that's my theory, the reason why we get sort of, we don't prioritize sexual well-being, and why it tends to diminish, because it's not prioritized, and because we are not good at being in general. So that's why I'm a sex therapist, but I would rather call it a sexual well-being therapist, because it's about being, and we are bad at it in general as a culture. We're good at doing, at producing, at thinking, we're perfect. But sex therapy, first and foremost, is about connecting to your body and being in the moment during sex, or in life in general, taking pleasure from life. So people who are able to be present, in their lives with whomever, but especially with their partners, to take pleasure, they usually don't have the problems of reconnect, you know, with the sexual desire, because it's just one part of it. Even though I'm a sex therapist, I'm saying, you know, sex is just one part. But usually, if there are problems here, it indicates that there is something going on the broader context between the couple and in a person's life.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
Yes.
So what are some of your practical tools? So you've got a couple who, maybe there's children in the mix as well, and so you can't get any privacy, let alone that space. What might you suggest that people could do to recreate some of that space and desire again? Because there's probably a lot of intimacy, as in real caring and nurture and friendship.
It really... The truth is, yes, that depending on a child and depending on the workload of parents, then there is a certain amount of stress that you have to cope with, and then very often people would say, I just don't have power for it, and that should be respected as well. And yet we have to understand that it creates sort of like a vicious cycle. The parenthood, especially in the first 2 years, the parenthood creates a lot of joy and also a lot of stress. The stress inhibits our desire. That's just the physiology. And then the less desire we have, the less sex we have, the more stressed we are. So it goes on and on and on. And then at some point, the couple has to decide, all right, either we deal with sex, we just have it, no matter how stressed and tired we are, or we're dealing with the stress. And reducing the stress. There are some situations when it's almost out of our control, and we have to, because children never come. I, as a parent of 2 children, it never happens that it's just the child and nothing else is happening in your life. There's there are parents getting sick. There's political situation, this, that. So you have to balance it all. But once you prioritize it as a couple, not just one person who decides to save the whole relationship, it has to be a mutual decision and mutual prioritization. Then together, through communication, there are different ways that you can make it better. I wouldn't say resolve, because some situations are hard, are complicated, and it's not just like, okay, in one day we're going to have a great sex life. It takes some time.
A lot of work as well.
A lot of work and commitment. But commitment is not just to sexual intercourse, but commitment to bring back this playfulness and the erotic flow between the couple. That's what we're after.
Yeah. Oh, this is amazing. I'm so glad you're staying with us, Madina. But first, we're going to take a look at the Age of Love event, and it's the second event that we've held, but this time we were dealing with men's sexual well-being. Now, Madina, in your TED Talk, you use a chair to demonstrate the importance of happiness in relationships and how it can change a lot. And I would love it if you could give us a bit of a flavour.
I would love to. That was
such a good talk. Such a good talk.
Thank you. It was quite a while ago, but it still stands true. So what I like to say, what I imagine a long-term relationship is sort of like a game of musical chairs, and it's international. I found that almost practically every culture would have this game where you would have more people. Well, the amount of chairs would be less than the amount of participants. So they start playing the game, you know, it's all fun and it's all romantic, and then they're like, okay, we're kind of tired, let's sit on the chair. When the music stops, you know, when they just slow down. And I figured out that we were taught the wrong rules of the game.
Oh, I love this.
So how we end up with just one chair. And so when the music stops, either one person is sitting and the other one is standing. It's like, why am I standing? I want to have a sit. Or you would sit on somebody's laps, which is also a good idea, but not sustainable.
Yes.
So this whole thing, and I will explain a bit more. And then the other option is that you sit with your half butt on the chair, which is also uncomfortable, not sustainable. Nobody told us that we can bring our own chair into the relationship, you know, and then this way, so when there are two people and two relationships, it has much more chances to be sustainable. There is no guarantee, obviously, but there are higher chances that we will be able to have this proper conversation with each other, you know, instead of just having a fight of who is going to have a sit, who's going to sit. So in my understanding, chair stands for maturity, and there are 7 aspects of it, which I described in my book. So I even coined the term maturity. So you bring your own maturity this way, which is like emotional, financial, physical, and so on. So this way, it's more about maturity and self-sufficiency required to enter and to maintain the relationship.
I love that because that almost takes away the whole, oh, it's my other half. I've never liked that phrase because I don't believe in that. I believe that I am a whole, my husband is a whole, and we actually together are better than two halves.
I know. This whole half thing is so toxic to start with, but it's so promoted by the culture. Work on your chair first and work on your chair in the relationship as well. It's not like, okay, now I'm ready and take me as I am. You can always sort of build a small bridge between each other, but there's always 2 separate chairs, and that's why it's so important for desire as well. Like I said, there has to be a sense of separation, because as soon as we are merging into one, then it's not, you don't see your partner as a separate person, but as you.
That's so fascinating, and we have actually had a viewer who sent in a question because they knew you were coming in, and they've asked, what about neurodiverse couples? So what if one person's chair is just, the preference is for a chair that looks like this?
Great example. So I just finished reading a really wonderful book about the relationships, the difference of the relationships that are built with people on the spectrum, and how touch, for example, certain smells, certain preferences would be different, and they first of all, they need to be acknowledged.
Yes.
Just because my chair is like that, my neurotypical chair is like that,
it doesn't
mean that it has to be for everybody. But what happens again, if we look at the broader cultural aspect, no, we would say, no, that's not how it should be. No, sit and be happy with this, because normal people are happy with this type of chairs. And it's obviously we're laughing here, but it's a very, very traumatic experience. And what the couple needs to do first is to acknowledge, even even if it's, and sometimes acknowledging is not that easy, you would need support. And you would ask for, and there are all kinds of groups for neurodiversity where you can ask for support from a community or from a specialist. But sometimes, for example, in my case, as I read the description of people with Asperger's syndrome, I was like, that's not, oh, that's my father. So just reading about it made me realize, and it was such a big relief, because he's 73, never diagnosed, always, called a weirdo in our collectivistic culture because he wanted things his way and they were not obviously respected. But yeah, so sometimes just reading about it already brings a relief and a new perspective.
Yeah.
But it has to be done with respect and just understanding that it's a different way of.
And that's where talking to other people might come in as well, because
Definitely,
and then you might know that someone else's partner is like your father, for example, and you think, and just knowing, just talking and highlighting different aspects of how people are diverse and are different, then that is a relief in itself, just knowing that there's one other person out there that is like you. And you could be surprised how many people first are not diagnosed, even in their later ages, how people are actually struggling and they have this sort of family secret, because that's one of the characteristics of many families, that there is a secret that you need to hide from everyone dearly and struggle it on your own. And that's what I always offer to couples, not to go out and tell their problems to everyone, but expand their social networks and don't become each other's besties, in a sense that do, but at the same time don't forget about your other social networks, that one person cannot carry the weight of all. Yeah, there's no couple is an island, are they? You always need other people around.
Definitely. So it brings us back again to this healthy separateness. How would you call it?
Yeah, no, I think that sums it up really nicely. I mean, I wish we had longer to speak with you. Where can we find you to learn more about you, your websites, watch your TED Talk?
So mostly right now I'm on Instagram. I'm also writing articles for Medium. If you just Google Madina Sex Therapist, then you would have my website, because you wouldn't remember. It's madinademirbas.com, but it's a complicated last name. But Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Thank you. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, we want to have you back, Madina. You're just so fascinating. Now, we are going to get Madina ready for our expert challenge, which is the Stroop test. So we'll be back with you just after this.
Hello, join me, Stacey Bullock, host of Tools for Everyday Living, on E360's Positive Vibrations channel every Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on E360 TV.
Welcome to the Stroop Test Challenge, Madina. This is, you'll know it from A-level psychology. This is where we're going to show you a word on the screen, a colour on the screen, but you're going to need to call out the colour the word is written in, not the word itself. So if you see the word blue and it's written in green, you have to say green.
All right. There
are 20 of them. The object is to get them all right in as quick a time as possible. Right. And then we do have some scores on the board. We've got a hypnotherapist on there. We've called him Patient X. It's actually my husband. He's an engineer. And you've got me. I'm a psychologist like you are. So that's where we are. So whenever you're ready, and just for our viewers at home, we do have a green screen in this studio, which means that your green is going to look a little bit strange on the screen, just so you know. Okay, when you're ready, let's go.
Green, yellow, blue, all right, purple, black, green, blue, purple, red, black, blue, purple, red, Yellow, green, blue, blue, yellow.
Well done! Stop the time.
34.96.
Wow, you have beaten the hypnotherapist who was at the top of the board, who was on 49.16. So that was
34.96.
34.96. Oh my goodness, right to the top. Fantastic. Congratulations. Look at that on the leaderboard. Yay.
That was nice.
Amazing. Well, we were going to come back to you with Business Boost right after this. A world without the arts is one without confidence, creativity and community. And yet funding has been reduced every year. Arts programs have been shown to benefit social inclusion and well-being, particularly for marginalised groups, with projects fostering a sense of belonging, cultivating mutual understanding, and breaking down social barriers and isolation. Participation in arts programs can help boost confidence and open doors to opportunities that may otherwise be inaccessible. Click Arts Foundation offers grants up to £2,000 for grassroots arts projects twice a year, with our community arts experience trustees meticulously scoring each project on impact and sustainability. To date, we have supported craft and visual arts projects, dance, drumming for well-being, and preservation of heritage and culture. If you share our passion, not just for maintaining the arts themselves, but contributing to the many benefits it can bring, please consider making a donation to Click Arts Foundation registered charity. In today's Business Boost, I thought I would talk about emotional intelligence, given that that has been one of the topics that we've looked at in today's show. It's about being able to read the room, and that's an important skill no matter whether you're dealing with personal stuff or professional stuff. So there's 4 areas of emotional intelligence according to Salovey and Mayer. And they say the first is emotional perception, emotional reasoning, emotional understanding, and then emotional management. So let's start with emotional perception. One way that you can learn to get a little bit better with emotions, it's a little bit like the Eskimos. Do they see lots of different types of snow, or do they just have a lot of words for it? Well, the two kind of go together. So what I suggest you do is look at as many emojis as you can and see if you can name all of those different emotions that you're seeing, or simply just name as many emotions as you can in one go, because that way, the more you can name, the more nuance that you have within your understanding. So give that one a go in terms of emotional perception, because that means somebody, when you look at them, the basic emotions, it might be, are they angry? Are they fearful? Are they scared? But that can be broken down even further. Are they actually resentful? Are they guilty? Are they stressed? There are so many ways each emotion can be broken. So emotional perception is really helpful. Emotional reasoning is the second one that they talk about, and this can relate a little bit to emotional management. So emotional reasoning is where perhaps somebody behaves in a certain way and then maybe you take it personally, but the reasoning aspect is, well, could I have taken this a different way? Could there be a different explanation for that behaviour? So, for example, somebody blanks you in the street. Well, actually, were they blanking you, or were they maybe so consumed with whatever it was they were doing? And the simple way of dealing with emotional reasoning is asking the question. Get curious. Don't get cross, get curious. Ask them, oh, I saw you the other day. Oh, are you okay? You totally blanked me. And actually that person may even say, oh my goodness, I'm really stressed, and they might actually open up to you. So that can be quite helpful to use. Emotional management is a little bit harder, because emotional management is really about being able to hold it in ourselves, to find the time and the place. Aristotle said it's very easy to get angry, but to get angry with the right person at the right time to the right amount, that's very difficult. And that's where emotional management comes in. And this can be if you're very practiced at taking deep breaths, or calming your mind down and saying, oh, that's not to do with me, or using affirmations, great. If that is you, absolutely great. But if it is not, I'm going to give you one technique, and it comes from dialectic behavior therapy. It is known as the stop technique. When you're in that heightened moment of emotion, stop. And this is Linehan, you can look her up. Stop. That's the S, stop. And the T, take a step back. This may be physically, to get out of that situation, or it might be metaphorically. So it might just be simply getting that distance in your mind. The work comes in on the O. The O is where you think about the outcome you were trying to achieve, because usually when you're in a heightened space of emotion or place of emotion, what will happen is you just want to win. So what you want to do is think about, well, what were you trying to achieve? What was the outcome? And then stick with O, what are the options that you can have when it comes to that particular outcome? And then when you proceed, that's the P at the end of stop, you move forward doing something from one of the options you've looked at. Because one thing I can absolutely guarantee is that if you move forward doing the same thing that you've done the 50 times before, you're going to go right back into that particular situation. So our last one is emotional understanding. And this is where, again, empathy comes into it. But there is a little caveat here. Some people are very, very good at emotional empathy, and this is what we tend to think empathy is. We think it's emotional. I feel your pain. I really, you understand it because you can sense it, you can feel it. And some people are absolutely brilliant at it. I am not, and I will happily come out and say that. I am terrible at feeling emotions. I can look at something and understand what's going on, but I won't feel it. However, I'm extremely good, and this is part of my job, at cognitive empathy. I get it, and I can explain it, and I can support you with it, but I'm quite compartmentalized. I'm sure Madina would be able to say that there's a whole upbringing relating to that. But what I am saying to you is when it comes to emotional understanding, don't just think it's all about feeling it. Yes, it's about empathizing with somebody, but that empathy can be feel it, I feel that, I feel your pain, or I get it. It's about understanding. And just to finish off, people always ask me, well, is empathy better than sympathy? And everyone seems to think it is. Sympathy is still better than the last one I'm going to give you. Sympathy is I see it. Empathy is I get it. The one I don't want you to have is projection. You think, you feel. That's the biggest problem of all. That's the one that's an absolute no-no when it comes to emotional understanding. So I hope that's just given you a little bit of a flavour of some of the things you can think about to improve our EQ, our emotional quotient. Well, welcome back to the last bit of the show. Top tips and thoughts from today.
Well, there's a lot of information. Excuse me. Top tips, I suppose, is don't hide away and don't shy away. So that's what's kind of the main message is. So, talk to your friends, read and find out information and realise that you're maybe not alone in the situation you think you might be alone in. Talk to your partner, obviously. Maybe that's a place to start. And realise if that somewhere along the line intimacy might have been lost or changed, that you can get back to somewhere that you both want to be, maybe.
Yeah, I like that. And for me, it is that word intimacy, because for so long I've always had intimacy linked with sexual well-being, whereas actually I think it is quite a mind-opening perception that too much intimacy can become problematic. It can hinder the desire, because when Madina was talking, she's absolutely right. I think when you haven't seen someone, you get a bit rose-tinted as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I guess that enhances the desire. Yeah,
absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah.
Not just the heart, maybe. So
yeah.
That's an interesting concept, interesting thought that actually too much of somebody can make that go the opposite way to the way you think it might go.
Yeah, it becomes natural then. I think the other thing that's really important is the neurodiversity, because that's where you've got two people who just have different desires, different needs, different preferences.
Yeah.
And I do love Madina's point, well, we all cope with this chair, so, get on with it.
Exactly.
And it's so not true.
No.
Because that's just as mean to that person as that person really struggling to understand what you need as well.
A counsellor could help bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Because if you have two different people, and everyone's different, but if you have people they don't quite match, then sometimes it's just a matter of finding out how to meet in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. We do hope that you're going to join us again next week, where we've got another amazing guest lined up to really unpack all the things that are going on, because mental health matters.